Hi everyone. We're going to look at coordinates today in two different respects. We're going to look at horizontal and vertical lines and how they compare to the axes. And we're also going to look at finding midpoints. Before we actually begin, I'd like you to do this little starter activity. So if you could press pause, try questions 1 and 2, and then we will go through the answers together. Okay? All right, well done. Let's take a look. So it tells us in question 1 that y is equal to negative x. Okay, well, when I'm looking at that, what that means is whatever x happens to be, y will be the negative value of that. Okay, so if we look at part A, where they tell us x is 2, well, that would have to mean that y is negative 2 because it's negative x. So that's the answer to the first bit. Part B would have to be when x is 5, then y would be negative 5. Part C, if x is negative 1, then y is negative of negative 1. Well, we know negative times a negative gives us a positive, so y would be 1. And finally, for part D, if we have x is equal to negative 4, and y is equal to negative of negative 4, then that would mean that y is equal to 4. All right, so that's the first one done. Well done to those of you who got that. And question 2 says to add each pair of numbers and then have the answer. Now, if we don't read carefully, we may not have it. Okay, having it means to divide by 2. So let's look at part A. We would have 6, add the 4, and then we would divide by 2, which is equal to 10 divided by 2, which is equal to 5. For part B, we would have 3 add 9 divided by 2, which is equal to 12 divided by 2, which is equal to 6. Part C, we would have 2 add 5 divided by 2, which is 7 divided by 2. Now, we could help ourselves by turning this into a mixed fraction. 2 goes into 7 3 times with a remainder of 1. We don't need to leave it like that. We can use a decimal since it's just a half. That's a 0.5, okay? Part D, we have negative 5 add 7 divided by 2. Now, that's the same as saying 7 minus 5 divided by 2. I've rearranged, which gives me 2 divided by 2, which is 1. Part E, we have negative 2 add 8 divided by 2, which is equal to 8 take away 2 divided by 2, or 6 divided by 2, which we know is 3. And finally, negative 3 add 7 divided by 2, which equals 7 take away 3 divided by 2, which is 4 divided by 2, which is 2. All right, so well done those of you who did the starter, and we are now going to move on to our first modeling exercise. Okay, so let's take a look first of all at the key point. It says here that on the line with equation y equals 1, the y coordinate is always 1, and the line is parallel to the x-axis. On the line with equation x equals 3, the x-coordinate is always 3, and the line is parallel to the y-axis. Okay, so it looks here like any line where y is equal to a constant, like 1 or 2 or 3, etc., that it will be parallel to the x-axis. And here is our x-axis right here. Okay? And if we have a line where x is equal to a constant, such as 3, 4, 5, etc., then it will be parallel to the y-axis, which is this axis here, which tells us that our y equals the constant lines are going to be horizontal, okay, and that our x equals a constant lines are going to be vertical. All right, so can you pause the video and write down those two key points, and then we will continue looking at question 4. So please pause now and write down those points. Okay, thank you for writing those down. Let's take a look at question 4 together. It first says to write down the integer coordinates of all the points you can see on line A. Integer means whole number, okay? So we're going to write down all of the integer coordinates that we can see on line A. Well, this is line A here. So let's take a look. The x value is always 4. It's the y value that changes. So let's start at the top. Okay, I can see that that would be a 6, okay, even though it's not labeled, so I am going to put that one down. So we would have, for the x-coordinate 4, and then comma 6. We would then have, as we move down, 4 comma 5. So let's just put these dots on there for you. Okay, so that was our, a bit bigger. That was our 4 comma 6. There we go. 4 comma 5. Then we have 4 comma 4. And we carry down to 4 comma 3. Okay, I'm going to keep going because actually we can go all the way to -2 on the y-axis. Okay, so 4 comma 2, 4 comma 1, 4 comma 0, 4 comma -1, and finally we can see 4 comma -2, and those are the ones we can see on the graph. So that's part A done. Part B says, what do you notice about the coordinates on line A? Okay, well, we notice that the y values change, the y coordinates, but the x coordinates stay the same. So we can write x coordinates are always 4, but the y coordinates change. Okay. Right. And part C says to copy and complete. Okay, so let's take a look at this. It says the equation of line A is, okay, so let's write that down. The equation of line A is, right, so if we're looking at A, what's consistent? Well, the y could change all the way to infinity positive and all the way to infinity negative. So that's not going to tell me the equation, but what doesn't change is the x value. So we have to state what the x value always is, which is x is equal to 4. And that is actually our equation. X equals 4. Okay, and that's the answer to that one. So let's look at part 2, where it says the equation of line B is, well, let's look at B. This is B. Okay, it's also a vertical line, so x will be equal to something, but we need to know what that constant is. And if we look, it doesn't matter which point we use, x is always -2. Okay, because there's our -2. So we would say that x is equal to -2. And that would be our answer to part 2. That's the equation. Remember, an equation has an equal sign. Okay, so in this case, that line B, is x equals -2. And part 3, we would have the equation of line C is, well, we notice that for line C, we are now horizontal. So it's not going to be x equals something. It will be y equals something like they said, but we need to find out what that value is. Well, if we look, y is always equal to 3 as we go along. Okay, because there's the 3. So our answer would be y equals 3. Final answer. Okay, so let's just review that. Okay, horizontal lines are parallel to the x-axis and have equations in the form y equals a constant, okay? And vertical lines are parallel to the y-axis and have equations in the form x equals. Okay, so can you pause the video and make sure that you've written that down in your notes? Okay, that's very important. In fact, you can highlight them. They are that important. Put stars beside them. Okay, you need to remember that. That gets you about 2 or 3 marks in your exam papers. Okay, and it's a pretty straightforward thing to pick up. Okay, all right, so please make sure you've written that down, and then once you've done that, you can press play again, and we're going to move to our first try question. Okay, thank you for doing that. Let's move you on to, I've got to get rid of this, hold on. Yes, okay. Right, so I'm going to make that a bit bigger for you. Can you press pause, try the 2 questions that are there, and then we will go through the answers together. Okay, well done. Let's see how we did. Let's start with question 5. Okay, just get rid of that. There we go. Right, so question 5, they've given us axes. They want us to write down the equations labeled P, Q, R, and S. Okay, so we did this in the example that we just did. So let's take a look. Let's start with P. We need to look, is it horizontal or vertical? Well, the line P is vertical, okay, and it is going through where x equals -4, so our equation is x equals -4, okay. For Q, again, we're vertical, and we're going through x equals 5, so that is our equation. Okay, let's look at R next. R is horizontal this time, so we know it would be y equals, and it's going through -3, so y equals -3. And finally for S, again, we're horizontal, so we know it's y equals, and it's going through 1, so y equals 1. Okay, so that's question 5 done. Right, so for question 6, it said you needed to draw a coordinate grid from -5 to +5. Okay, now that means that we need a y-axis, we need an x-axis, we need to make sure that we have 1 through 5 on each of those axes. Please remember that you must make sure that your gradations or your separations are the same distance or length, okay? If you don't do that, you'll have mistakes in terms of your points and where they're located. All right, so we've done that. It then says to draw and label these graphs. Okay, I'm going to use a slightly different color for you. In fact, I'm going to use a highlighter because it'll be easier for you to see. Okay, you guys would use a pencil, obviously, because it's a diagram. Right, and I want part A, which is y equals 5. Okay, so we're on the y-axis. We need to find 5, which is there, and then we can put in our line.